This conference will now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
I just got muted all the time.
Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, everybody. Um, this is Joost, your moderator for the day. And we're actually about to get started. We're still expecting quite a few folks to join us. In the meantime, I'll show my face to you to the extent that you can see me. But I suggest we wait another few minutes to let some other folks also sign in and join us, and then we'll get started quickly. So we try to stick to our timings. Thank you. So hang in there. We'll be with you again shortly. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Let's get started here. Welcome. We got a really exciting program set up for you this afternoon with some excellent speakers and some really cool innovations and new angles on how to leverage data in the context of sustainability, food security, and smallholder impact. Before we get to the meat of that, I would like to go through a couple of, if you like, housekeeping comments. I'm actually your moderator of the day, your host of the day. So let me first start with a couple of practical aspects. For starters, I would like to reach out to you and let you look at the right-hand side of the platform here in which you are of your screen. You could see that there's a chat box. You will see that also if you go to the bottom right where there's a circle, basically a text box on which you can click, and then the chat box will appear. If you could be so kind to introduce yourself, maybe include your company or email address, as well as an indication of what you would expect from today's webinar, that would be most helpful. Hi, Tim. Hi, Val. So if you guys could do that as well. So next to your name, company, if it makes sense, your title or role, and an indication of what you would expect from today's webinar. So next to that, the same chat box will allow you to give comments or ask questions along the way. So the way we structure and format today's webinar is that we will have a couple of demonstrations. We have a couple of presentations through which I will go in a minute, so you have the overview. And you will be having the opportunity, of course, to ask questions and make comments. But what we want to suggest you do is that you put that in the chat box, the same chat box where you as we listen to the presentations. So we can then collect the questions and we can then structure that and ask the speakers to comment during the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. In that way, we have it structured and we can make sure that everybody gets a chance to ask his or her question and get that properly addressed. And it will also allow for a bit of interaction and maybe some fun discussions, who knows. So that is all comments and questions in the context of the chat box. Finally, a few more points here on the webinar itself in terms of the fact that it will be recorded. So you will receive a follow-up email within the next few days where you find a link to the presentations, as well as a recording of today's webinar if you want to share anything with others or you want to re-listen to some components of the webinar. And obviously, you're welcome to share this with your colleagues or friends. So all our speakers, and if I see that correctly, not all of them have done that yet, will have their cameras on, so you can see who is who, and sort of can identify them and link them to their names. But we would like to ask you to please disable your camera, although we would love to see all of you, of course, but we also want to manage our bandwidth and connectivity. And to avoid any noise or side distractions, to please mute if you're not speaking. So with that having said, I would suggest that I give it 1 or 2 minutes then to further introduce yourself again on the right hand side, and then I will go to the presentation and the overview of today's speakers. So I will go now to the presentation for today with the share screen. Which you should be able to see by now. And as more of you guys sign on, I would like to kick off by saying that this title is obviously a lot of big words in there. The path to food security, the power of data, obviously smallholders in the center. But what we really want to stress is that it is key in this context to understand that at the end of the day, data only makes sense if they can serve African SMEs and African farmers. So I would like to use this context for my scene setting presentation over the next couple of minutes. Before doing that, I first would like to take you swiftly through the agenda of the day. After my comments and remarks, I would like to introduce Venetia and Grace, who have some really exciting news on the fertilizer watch, which has just recently been launched. And you will have the opportunity not only to have a live demo of the type of insights you can generate from there, but also on how to actually get access yourself to this wonderful innovation and excellent visualization of real grassroots data. This will be followed by actually a tradition in many ways, but more and more interactive as it has evolved over the years, which is the African fertilizer map. It will be presented by Antonella, again with a live demonstration as well, and really presenting a true portal for Africa when it comes to the fertilizer market dynamics. Then there will be an interesting, a pretty exciting phase as well, because we will have two entrepreneurs to present their story and their view on how to look at the agribusiness in Africa and in the world, really, when you use data in a smart way and manage that in such a way that it doesn't only impact the supply chain efficiently and production, but it can also build a business. So that will first be done by Ronald, who will tell you about AgriSim and how they work and what they do, followed by Viresh, who will talk about the trading platform he has launched with his fellows under the name of Fruitful. So after having had all these presentations, we will get into the Q&A session. Obviously, as I mentioned during the introduction, you can ask your questions already during the presentations. So you don't have to make any notes first or lose the thought along the way. You can immediately drop those questions in the chat box, and we will try to accommodate all of them and hopefully get them answered satisfactorily. So after having done that, we would like to end up with our CEO sharing some closing remarks to basically mark the end of the day and provide a brief wrap up. And hopefully we've had a few two exciting hours together. So let me first give you a little bit of context on how we believe we should look at the context of why data is so important. If you just look at the actual data on what is happening today, what is happening as we speak, we all know, and I'm sure that will come back again a couple of times, that demand is rapidly outgrowing supply in terms of local production, and many argue even in terms of global production. While, and I'm happy to see that more folks are joining us, while at the same time population is increasing, and obviously the need for food is increasing for multiple reasons. At the same time, there's still a huge opportunity just to triple production of food crops as is with existing arable lands. But the problem is that a lot of the farmers who could actually accomplish that are not properly reached and not effectively, because they don't get advice punctually and they don't get receive the training consistently and at scale. And on top of that, there's no structured supply chains. There's no well-structured markets to accommodate that demand, that market dynamic, to secure the offtake for the farmer, but also to provide proper supply for the existing demand. So how is this going to be addressed? Well, if you look at today's presentations, I think there's three core themes which can really drive food security while leveraging the power of data. This is across market insights, so you actually know who you target and what you do for whom based on facts. Retail trading, which helps to accommodate and professionalize the supply chain from producer to processor to the marketplace to the end consumer, and vice versa as well to the actual primary producer when it comes to the input side. And finally, when you look at that producer, to optimize the farmland. So how can that be done? Because obviously we understand this, and obviously a lot of people talk about how we can better do that using all these innovations and agri-tech and smart solutions and all that. But at the end of the day, you see a lot of people struggle with it. Why do they struggle? Because if you want to use data, there has to be a logic in order to convert that into impact. And that impact has to be measurable, but it also has to be relevant. The key way to do that, in order to translate this into food security, is by having, on one hand, proper partnerships in place, public-private partnerships. So you have key stakeholders who are indeed engaged and involved, and the business model. So actually a profit and an ROI, return on investment, is accomplished. Because otherwise it cannot be sustained and it cannot be scaled. So if you look at AFAP has been active exactly in this core space when it comes to the power of data. And I must say, having looked at AFAP and the way they work over the past 2-3 years myself in person, it's really amazing what they have been able to accomplish with real grassroots work across multiple countries in Africa, with practical business support, technical support, but most of all, actionable advice, which translates into real supply chains, which function and sustain themselves with true impact and true engagement of farmers who can do their business better because they get access to inputs the right time in a way that it's affordable, but they also are linked up to markets, so they have an offtake, so they can actually, also liquidate their own obligations as well as make a decent living. And as AFAP has been able to contribute to that and co-build and co-create this, a lot of data has been collected, but particularly a lot of insights have been accomplished. And that can be used for some key needs if you look at the needs in the marketplace, which is about collective action on standards, because you can have that many data as you like, but if they're not properly standardized in some sort of way, it's difficult to add them all up, it's difficult to compare them, and it's difficult to make them actionable. Secondly, AFAP has been able to build real strong and powerful networks. Which their partner tells that they have initiated themselves, or in which they have been invited given the work as AFAP. And that is not just about the farmers per se or the public sector, but also about the industry, about the small, medium-sized enterprises who are so often forgotten as the missing middle, as they're often called. But nevertheless, using the advances of digital technology, there's so much more we can do on that front to leverage these networks. And finally, if you look at data from a different perspective, what we have learned from an AFAP's perspective, there's so much wealth in using data in terms of better assessing and better benchmarking. So you can make really actionable programs based on really practical, concrete priorities, whether that's in the area of policy, financing, or digitization for that matter, and certainly also for extension. This is key in order to be able to have true impact and really leveraging the power of data. So I think it's important to have that context well in view, and also to understand how AFAP has been able to learn from this and translate that into its work. Because at the heart of AFAP, obviously, there is this public-private partnership framework and working model in which we engage all the key stakeholders. But at the heart, it is about the inputs of suppliers before and during the planting season. And it's about the output aggregating during harvest and post-harvest, reducing losses and increasing farmers' income. And if you look at the model, whether that's pre-production process, where you have to ensure that the smallholder farmers are indeed able to get access to the financial market, so they get access to the dealers and the right inputs at the right time at the right price in order to come up with these outputs and accomplishing those yields, getting the right training. It's then linked to how it then helps to further accommodate the whole supply chain, liquidate and set off whatever obligations they have, and making sure the market is properly provided with the right outputs, whether that's a processor or whether that's a retailer or whether that's an end consumer. And that's in that key area, it is where AFAB really helps and plays a core role. So just a quick few examples on how we then use that into specific solutions. This one is about actionable priorities, where you use digital extension, which are tied to both input and output market linkages. So this is about supporting a farmer who can provide to a processor who actually, and an aggregator for that matter, who actually needs that to properly plan his processing unit and to do proper procurement. But at the same time, the farmer himself or herself needs to do the right things at the right time and to get best practice and right input management and proper record keeping so they can optimize their yield, improve their financial planning, and get access to services because they actually, one, exist, two, they have a track record. And by the way, it helps also to make farming more exciting for young folks and collaborate better. This only works if you have real grassroots data, which are properly aggregated, which is one example on how we work with taking extension to the next level, but also allowing existing extension networks to increase their reach. What it also does is as you aggregate data, you can better have efficiencies in terms of targeting, which indeed leverages your extension infrastructure, as well as your yield management, because you basically know better which buttons to push. But this is an example of Nigeria, where you can basically see by state which areas are red, which are yellow, which are green. Depending on the state which is red, you can then zoom into the actual state and see, okay, which areas or districts there is indeed a red situation. And in this context, red is pretty straightforward. During the time which has passed, a certain number of tasks should have been completed. If they haven't been completed consistent with the time passed, the color of that district or area or state for that matter changes. So then you can zoom in that area and say, okay, what's the cause of this? Is it a specific farmer group? Is it a specific task? And how does that link to the realized and expected yield? Is it linked to the right inputs? Is it linked to certain activities? Or is it linked to other aspects which have been ignored and need intervention, training, or insights? And this is just one way of taking it from a macro level to a very specific targeted individual level, and vice versa, because it's based on grassroots data. A similar way, but from a different angle, is in the area of policy review, design, and implementation. If you indeed understand what the market maturity is, if you like, in a country, so you look at the status of fertilizer policy regulations, quality of fertilizer, market access, R&D, institutional support, and you tie that to a rating and a model, you can then link that to measurable ways of putting that into context and get some key indicator scores, which can help rate the status of that specific market. And link that to policy a country can then take in order to address those needs and basically help develop the market into the next stage, enabling the environment, increasing investments, but doing the right thing at the right time based on data. So, back to the theme of today. Having said all this, it's about three core themes we're going to discuss today: market insights, retail trading, and farmland optimization. And I'm really happy that I've had the opportunity to give you a bit of a peek under the hood, if you like, in terms of what in our view is so important if you want to make this successful. Again, if data is not linked to logic and that logic is not translated into real impact, which can then be such that there is a proper embedding in effective public-private partnerships and a business model and a reasonable return on investment so it can sustain and scale itself, it's going to be very hard to make data work for the farmer, and it's going to make it very difficult to make data work for the SMEs, because it will not sustain, it will end the moment a program or an intervention or a government initiative stops. And obviously that's what we do not want. So I'm really excited now to take you to the next phase of this webinar and get into the real meat of all this with some different examples of market insights, farmland optimization, and on effective retail development of the supply chain. So we will now move to our first speaker, Vinisha, who works at Development Gateway, a very strong partner of AFAP and very successful with their VIFA program, which is Visualizing Insights on Fertilizer for African Agriculture. And I'll be happy now to hand the speaker, if you like, the microphone over to her, and also to Grace, who basically will have not really a joint presentation, but a complementary presentation, an overview of the Africa Fertilizer Watch as well. And Grace is next to being a very strong partner and associate with AFAP, but she is a coordinator at IFDC based in Kenya and a strong specialist in the area of fertilizer and for the AFO, the africafertilizer.org platform. So with this having said, I will now stop sharing my screen and hand over the floor to Vinisha and Grace. Thank you.
Thanks, Hughes. Can you see my screen? Excellent. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So let me first start out by introducing myself and introducing the program. And I don't have a presentation for us to look at. I'm just going to take a deep dive into the dashboard that we're about to launch actually on Tuesday, 1st of September. So my name is Vinisha Bhatia Murdoch. I'm a senior learning advisor at DG. We are a technology nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., but we have offices all over the world, more specifically in Kenya, Senegal, and Argentina. Then it goes on from there. So I lead a program called VIFA, Visualizing Insights on Fertilizer for African Agriculture. It's a mouthful. It's a 4-year program that is supported by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that began in 2019. As we said, AFAP and IFDC are both our key partners here. What I'm showing you here is actually the About Us page on the dashboard. The dashboard is one of 3 that we will be launching. This is the first one in Kenya. We will also be launching one for Ghana and Nigeria. One of the key challenges about data in the agriculture sector, and especially in the fertilizer, is that data are often in lots of different locations, in different formats that are challenging to access. And I'm sure some of you have been in a situation when you have asked for some agriculture data and you were sometimes literally handed keys to a room with paper stacked to the ceiling. Maybe not that extreme, but like you have data just handed to you in a way that you can't really use it. Also in the case of fertilizer sector, the data is also in the format that's not always usable. So for example, just getting raw data from customs doesn't help you understand. And so situations like this make harnessing data really challenging when it comes to making the decisions. And so the VIFA program was designed to holistically address sort of the supply, demand, and most importantly, the use of fertilizer data at both country and then as Africa as the regional level. And the VIFA brings together sort of the disparate data, but utilizing what is already available through partners like AFAP and IFDC, and then investing in innovations to fill in key data gaps. And we'll talk more about that through the COVID Watch dashboard that we will see soon, and then effectively sort of presenting this information that matters the most to both public and private sectors to make decisions. And so the goal of the dashboard is to meet the needs of the decision makers in the public sector, private sector, so that they ultimately can use it to inform that, as you said, that the right products are available at the right time in the right market, so that in the end the farmers could use them. And so this dashboard was designed through a very rigorous co-design approach, where we held several workshops with public and private sector key players in the countries, and to define their use cases. So start out with what decisions they need to make, like, and then link it back to the data that they need, and then to actually co-design each of the graphics that you're seeing right now. And so based on what you see here, there are four main parts to this dashboard. So there's price, there's use, availability, and policy. And these are the themes that the stakeholders wanted to package the information in. And then based on their stakeholders' prioritization, again, we also chose like four main graphics to show on the homepage of this dashboard. And so the first, I'm going to walk you through the graphics and sort of the story behind them, and then I'll show you quickly what it looks like in the detailed pages as well, and then I will pass it back to Grace to show you sort of how we closed a more immediate gap with the COVID response as well. So the first graphic that you see here is the price, and more specifically the cost buildup. Both public and private actors wanted to understand what makes products cost a certain way in a certain market. And this graphic helps you sort of analyze this information cost buildup by year. So you can select what year you wanted to do this analysis for. You can select it by product, and then you could do the analysis not just at the national level, say at the main port, but also at a specific location in the country. So how much did the product cost to get to a key market in the country? And then if you click on any of these components, it allows you to look in more depth on what are some of the costs that take you there. And then, of course, we have the sources on the bottom if you are wondering. The next graphic here that the stakeholders wanted to understand was national average consumption. And the users wanted to know at a very high level, first of all, are the farmers using enough product in the country? And so for public sector, this is needed to understand how is the progress being made toward the Abuja Declaration of using the line here to say, okay, are we reaching the goals of 50 kgs per hectare? And then for private sector, this meant at a very high level understanding the application rate and the demand in the country. So in this graphic, you could do the analysis by the year. You could do the analysis by specific nutrients you wanted to look at. And then if you hover over any of the pieces, you can see what the specific application is for that nutrient. The third graphic here explores the product availability. So going back to the original point, that do we have the right products in the market? Are they available at the right time? And how much is available? And so this graphic, again, was needed across both public and private sectors. And so you could do the analysis by first selecting the date range. So within a specific period. You wanted to cover some seasons or not. You could select the products. If you know what product you want to look at, you can go and choose those here. And then if you hover over them, you see the values in them. And then the last graphic here is the policy page, the policy information. So you want to understand like both public and private sector again, that what is the government footprint in the market, right? And we did this by putting together imports data that shows what is the product being imported for open market, what is a product being imported for subsidy, and then we took it a step ahead and said, of the open market product that was imported, what is then being blended locally, then being subsidized. And so hopefully this sort of gives you an overview of how, listening to the stakeholder demand, listening to the needs to make decisions, and linking it back to data sort of creates a graphic that meets the needs of the decision makers. And then from the homepage here, you can also click on the price here or say here to navigate to the price page. And to save up the time on loading, I've just preloaded it here. And so if you go into detail for a price page, you'll then can say, okay, we understand what the cost buildup was generally. Now take a deep dive into say, how has the cost changed over a time period? So this is looking at cost buildup by years, over 5 years right now. You can choose up to 2, 3, whatever you need. You can select the product again, location, categories, etc., and you will see the information. Again, you can click on the box here and you'll see the values in more detail. And then on top of it, you understand cost buildup. Then you want to know, what does the retail price look like in the market in a specific location? So you have a map with this. If you click on a dot here, you'll see the retail price in that location. Again, you could choose the product filter, the location to do analysis. The next one is understanding how has retail price changed over time. So again, same information as a snapshot in time right now, but then looking at evolution of that change. And then the last two graphics link that together. So next is if this is a retail price, what does the FOB price look like? What was the international price like? And then you can compare the two by putting the retail price together with the FOB price to monitor those trends. The next page is looking more at the use. So as I showed sort of at the big picture level, you can see what is the national average application rate. Okay, great. But what does that tell you underneath it? So first you want to understand apparent consumption. And so you can select that and by choosing the years you want to look at, the products, and then if you hover over any of the colors here, it'll tell you the name of the product and the amount. And then taking, again, the consumption information into more depth, you can look at it by apparent consumption, you can look at it by like actual consumption. So to get there, first you need to understand cropland under production. So we have a map for that shows you can choose the crops you want to look at, the years, and then if you click on the box, it'll tell you the amount of land that was under cultivation for that crop type. And then as you scroll down, you'll see that, okay, so we know how much land is being used, we know the general amount that's being consumed, but now if you wanted to make decisions, you need to like break that down by crops, right? So then here's a chart that shows sort of the top consuming crops, and then we have this categorized as the food crops or cash crops. Currently we have them all here, and then you can do the analysis. Okay, so maize, like how much does it consume by volume, by area cultivated, and then you can do this same analysis as a pie chart to see what is the portion for that crop in the total volume. And then the last one is the fertilizer use by crop. So understanding, okay, at national level. This is the consumption, the land under cultivation. Now, what does that look like by individual crop type in detail? So here's a map, you can choose the years, the crop type, and then if you click on any of the locations, you'll see the amount in there. And then the last ones are the same graphic that you saw on the homepage. So this sort of gives you a picture of how the user stories in the beginning through the co-design process could be more broken down into specific needs to make decisions, to like tell a story on the price, consumption that can ultimately impact how people want to choose to see information, to make sure that they're making the right calls for their stakeholders, but ultimately increasing the use of fertilizer in Africa. One of the things I didn't talk about is actually the gaps in data. And so as you can see, like sometimes accessing data could be challenging, and one reason is availability of the data. And Grace will talk more about that, but when the pandemic began, we had to quickly move to collect new type of information and repackage it for our stakeholders to make some decisions on the spot. And so I'm going to hand over to Grace to talk about how they worked on making another dashboard for COVID Watch. I am trying to flip back over to stop sharing my screen, Grace, so you can take it over.
Thank you, Venetia.
So,
So,
Grace, you're on. Thanks.
sorry?
Sorry, that was me. No, you're on. Just pay attention to the time, please. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Yes. As Venetia put it, I'm Grace Chilande. I work with IFDC, the International Fertilizer Development Center, as a fertilizer market specialist. And today I'll be taking you through a new product, a relatively new product known as the COVID Africa Fertilizer Watch. So we created this, of course, in response to what's happening globally, but more specifically to understand what impact, if any, COVID would be having in the fertilizer sector. So we initially had one-pager documents that we would develop starting from April all through to June. And as you can see, this is part of an archive that would show the different publications we did by region in West Africa and in East Africa. So in East Africa, we were publishing bi-weekly, and in West Africa, it was a weekly watch. And ideally, what this would be a one-pager trying to give a description of the impact COVID has had in the different indicators, which I'll show you. And this is just quickly to show you the different products that we had. And we had one for East Africa and West Africa. So quickly taking you back to what then we decided to develop in July is having an interface where people could quickly come get the information, understand what's happening at a country level, understand what's happening based on the different indicators that we're looking at. And then this information is free to access. You can download it. And the main purpose for this is just to inform any possible issues that would come up on food security. So this is to check on if there will be a limitation on access to fertilizers, and then if so, then what are the repercussions of this? How would it affect food production, and then eventually food insecurity? So just quickly taking you through this dashboard is going to be initially a 3-month dashboard. So we started in July, and we'll have one in August next week. Will be published next week, and then we'll have another one for September. So if you come to the homepage, you get an assessment of what's happening overall in West Africa and in East Africa. We'll give an update on the lockdown status by the different countries, fertilizer availability, what's happening at the ports, and what's happening with movement of product. So if we would use COVID trend just to get an assessment of what impact COVID is having in terms of infection rates. And then what measures are being put in place by the different governments in terms of health measures? Are there any stringent ones? Are there any strong restrictions, or are countries not sort of panicking about COVID? And then we're also assessing what's the economic impact. And with here, you can see we have different measures just to understand, is it a low impact? Is it limited impact? Is it moderate, or is there a strong impact? And then moving to something that is more fertilizer related, it's just trying to assess what's happening at the port. Ports, is product coming in? Are operations being affected by limited numbers of people allowed to work at the port at a time? So changes in shift. Are ships allowed to allow crew members to get off in the different ports when they're bringing in consignments? It's just trying to understand, is there any congestion issues? And if you click on a country, then it would zoom in and it would give you a comment if there's normal operations, and you could check through the other indicators just to understand what's happening at a country level, what's happening, and if anything, collecting this information on a monthly basis, moving away from when we did it on a weekly basis. It's just also to allow policymakers or analysts to have enough information or background information to allow for creation of solutions given the new issue that would arise in the coming months. Then ideally we would then move to domestic transport, just trying to understand how product is moving across the continent. And then we would check transit. So this is just trying to understand what's happening at the borders. We're having a lot of issues with movement of product, and that's based on different countries coming up with different restrictions, whether they've closed their borders or whether they're allowing regional movement, or whether the borders are open. So we're checking on this, and then moving closer to agro input access. So here we are checking on, are fertilizers actually available for sale? Are farmers being able to access fertilizers? And we also, we go a step further to understand pricing. If there's an increase in price, if there's a decrease in prices, what actual impact are we having on accessibility of fertilizers? And then we would have sector responses if we have any government initiatives, private sector initiatives in place that are trying to support and ensure there's no food insecurity as a result of COVID, and over and above the general issues that are going on in Africa. And then, of course, assessing stock availability. So as we're all well aware, like the East and Southern Africa push on seasons already ongoing, or seasons we're getting ready for seasons to start. And so product was already en route, or product was already in country. So we've not felt a significant impact on fertilizers or fertilizer availability. And so as we're assessing, or the reason why we create this watch is just to assess for seasons that are coming, or in terms of accessibility or availability of product, just to see what general impact would this have, and if COVID would play a role from an access perspective, but also from a consumption perspective. Yeah, so we would share the link. I will share the link for this page, and you're allowed to scroll through it, and then you would be able to get all the relevant information you need. So as I mentioned, this is updated on a monthly basis, and ideally it's a it was a July to September schedule. So we were foreseeing that a COVID assessment would be short term, but given how things are going, there's a tentative, or there's expectation that this would go all through to December, but hopefully we would not have to assess the impact of COVID on food production beyond December. But we will cross that bridge when we get there, in terms of understanding what else do we need to assess, what additional data do we need to continuously collect, so that we will be able to inform, would be able to equip policymakers, public and private sector, with the right information to be able to inform solutions to address the current impact of COVID in the fertilizer sector. I'll hand over back to you, Joost.
Yeah, it's wonderful, Grace. This is so exciting. I'm really happy that you guys have been able to bring this live and real time with some real up-to-date information through our joint collaboration. And it would be great if you could share the access to the Fertilizer Watch with all the participants. And obviously, everybody will have the opportunity to exchange contacts where needed. But again, great news and well done, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd like to move on to Antonella Harrison, and talking about interesting track records and very important market insights already with a built reputation over the years. Clearly, you're the right person here in this panel, Antonella. So I welcome the floor and would like to ask you if you could share your experience, but more important, also the current status of your portal on the fertilizer market dynamics in Africa. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning to everybody. And first of all, I'd like to thank HAFAP for inviting me to this webinar. For the ones who don't know me, I've been in the industry since 1993, quite a few years, in various form and shape, but basically in the publishing industry, starting as a reporter on the fertilizer trade, and then setting up my own company, and then selling eventually to a big publisher. And in the last 5 years, since 2015, I'm independent, completely independent on my own. You will see a couple of slides at the end if you want to know more about me, and some details at the end of my presentation. So I'm here today to talk about my new product, the africafertilizermap.com, which was live on the 7th of August to coincide with the 100th anniversary of OCP, which is the platinum sponsor of my project together with HAFAP. And I will try to explain today how this sits within today's topics of discussion. We heard from the previous speakers how providing data in the right way, in the right context, will give, secure more power and improve ability to smallhold farmers, like to many other actors, to make the right decision. So harnessing means utilizing, controlling, channeling, and in my case, particularly visualizing data, so that not only they could be accessible, but they could be also more understandable, clearer, and therefore usable to all audiences. Then we said path to food security. So this is the process that with this data, we hope to unlock, to bring agricultural transformation and then food security to Africa. So this is the homepage of my africafertilizermap.com, my website. It is a powerful image already with a strong message, because African women and their empowerment is a key factor for Africa's agricultural development. At the top of this slide, you will see the navigation bar of my website, which explains all the key elements of my data journey. It is a website, but also has an interactive part of it, and we'll talk more about this. For me, the Africa Fertilizer Map is a portal because it aims to be a gateway to Africa fertilizer data. It displays imports and exports from and into the various African countries, manufacturing and blending plants and projects, consumption figures, as well as it shares the various initiatives that are being deployed by a number of different and key players for the development of African agriculture. The portal has a history, a path, which I will tell you more over the next few slides. But more than anything, I have to say, for me, it is a very good and thorough cooperation with all the companies and associations that have been involved with me in this project, and which are indeed part of the path to food security. First of all, OCP Africa, which is a large producer, as you know, large producer in Africa, but is a very active player in Africa, and particularly for the development of Africa Sub-Sahara. AFAP, you heard about all their initiatives. These are my two kind sponsors of the project. AFO, the Africa Fertilizer Org, which Grace represents here, is my partner in this project, and as you heard, is a major data provider of fertilizer statistic data, and is hosted by the International Fertilizer Development Corporation Center. I also had the participation and data sharing in the project of IFA, the International Fertilizer Association, of African Plant Nutrition Institute, APNI, the Africa Union, AUC, AGRA, the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA. So you can see a number of very important stakeholders. This slide will show you the printed version, the latest printed version of the Africa Fertilizer Map, which was produced in April 2020. Obviously using data from 2018, because there is always a backlog in collecting all the data about all the countries. You can see that all possible data are represented on this map, and I've tried to be as clear as possible by doing so. This map is downloadable on my website together with the ones produced in previous years. It all started in 2017 when Patrick Effer from IFA suggested that I could do an Africa map. I had developed a trade flow map when I was the commercial director of fertilizer at ICIS, my latest company, in partnership with IFA. But at that time, when Patrick asked, I was on my own. I could see the challenges, because as we heard before, the data on Africa are collected by different organizations with different methodologies, timing, etc., etc. But I could see the right purpose of it. It would be the first visualization tool for Africa data, and so it was. So I developed my first map in 2017, and then I developed 2018, 19, and 20. Which are all downloadable on my website, just to see the change and the progression on the data. Each year I try to add updated figures, of course, thanks to the association, more information when available, and in a clear and more systematic way each year. While I was doing that, and tried to improve all the time to make it more clear, more understandable, to put the data into context. Two main things were happening in the fertilizer industry, but in the agriculture industry. One, the world was becoming more digital, and digitalization was the new must, even for fertilizer use and agriculture development. So I thought about developing a website with an interactive part to display historical data and trends so that people could see the path, the development of the data, and also more detailed information, for example, on projects and plans, particularly blended projects, which have been indeed grown exponentially in Sub-Saharan Africa over the past few years. When you go on the interactive part, you will see all these elements, imports, export, manufacturing plans, all popping up by using this icon. So if, for example, if you pop on the blending project in Nigeria, you will have, I think, 17 names coming up with capacity and some details. Obviously, I hope and I aim to add more details as I go along in future years, thanks to the help of the association, and everybody wants to help. Now, the second development, and the second thing that was happening, as I said before, in the industry was that the more I was looking at data and trying to gather more information on Africa, the more I was understanding the path. And so I could see how fertilizers are crucial for agriculture, how as well there were a lot of challenges, from logistics to finance to cost and pricing, everything, in the overall supply chain, from fertilizer to farmer and then to fork. How there were many key stakeholders involved within the private and the public sector, and now they were all doing good things for Africa, including, of course, my sponsor, OCP and AFAB. So I thought that I should show in my website not only the data, the figures, but also I should share this knowledge, this experience, the numerous initiatives that needed and they were done to develop Africa. They should be shared on my portal so that the portal could become not only a gateway to Africa's data, but also a sharing tool and a place where actors along the agri-food supply chain, not only fertilizer, the agri-food supply chain, could understand more what it was required for the development of Africa agriculture and for food security, which ultimately are some of the key United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The portal should also be there to share experiences and successes of all the company involved. So this is the purpose of my website, and I would say that fertilizers are key to Africa's development, and Africa's agriculture transformation is key to ensure food security and the end of hunger and malnutrition to the continent, while at the same time increasing farmers' productivity and providing agriculture sustainability. So a lot of targets and purposes all together. So my portal is being shared and will be promoted by the Fertilizer Association and the companies involved, but also by some government organizations, some United Nations organizations like UNECA, AGRA, AUC, on the way to Abuja, the Abuja 2 Summit, which hopefully will be held in 2021 or 2022, we'll see, for the further development, the enhanced development of Africa's agriculture, thanks to an effective partnership between the private and the public sector. So, and with this message, I would like to conclude my presentation. The next 2 slides will give you more details of who I am and my contact details, so that you please do not hesitate to contact me if you want to share your experiences on my website, your project, and therefore be part of this important path to food security. Thank you.
Wonderful, Antonella. That's fantastic, and indeed quite an accomplishment what you have been able to build over the past few years, because indeed data collection in Africa for this specific line of products is not obvious, and to do that consistently and over a longer period of time is even really challenging, as you outlined. But I think we've made some real good progress, and I think one of the key feats there is that you've been able to also tie up a lot of the different partners, players, and stakeholders in that framework and ecosystem, if you like, in order to get to more consistency and more professional management, really, of those data, in order to accomplish some meaningful insights on the fertilizer market and the real needs, which can be derived from those insights. So we can set our priorities straight and do that based on actual data instead of our own perceptions of those data. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we now would like to move to our next presenter, and we're actually getting more and more into the business and entrepreneurship really now, but still with a very strong hook up with data and looking at those data with a logic that actually can result in some significant impact. So I'm really happy to welcome Ronald here today, who can share his work and his view on this important theme with you as the CEO and founder of AgriSim from the Netherlands. So Ronald, if you would please like to take over from here and briefly introduce yourself and take us through your views and insights on this important theme. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joost, for your introduction. Very flattering. I hope I can work towards the expectations. I will now start sharing my screen. We are already busy, what you're going to see, with the last 10 years. So we are busy with this, and this means we have made a decision support system for smallholder farmers all over the world. So in first instance, with the decision support system, the farmer does not have to fill anything out. We have a lot of default data, either calculated, purchased from different sources, satellite drones, but also soil data that we have accrued over the last 10 years and made a calculation due to machine learning and artificial intelligence. So we call ourselves smart farming, not to be mistaken with other types of farming like precision farming. We are very well rooted already in some African countries. Of course, we're always looking for more in that sense. So as you all know, this is not new. We are really trying to produce more food in the coming 30 years. And that can also only be done by either technologically improvements like big data, using that for the advantage of smallholder farms, who is around 90% of total farmers. That means that you have to reach these people and have to convince them to use big data that can help them in their decision-making process. I'm not saying that the data will take over, because we will come to that. Data has also its limitations, as you understand, and you said it also, Joost. The interpretation of data is another one. But we need to produce a lot of food. So also 50% of the world's agricultural land is already degraded in a state that you have to put more fertilizers in this case. We talked about that a lot, but also compostation and other types of things you have to do in order to get the same yield out of it. So that is 10 years. In the last 10 years, we have interviewed a lot of farmers across the world, and whereby we created this pyramid. So in principle, the farmer's main pain is that the revenue decreases. That is due to customer demand, all kinds of pushing parts. So that means also the sales price is under pressure, the increase of costs because they need to get their yields out, the depletion of resources like let's say like the soil, like water, all kinds of climatic disasters, micro disasters in that sense. Lack of education is another big one that we have found out during our interviews, and also the fact that because of the lack of education, they tend to go towards traditional choices, which means the same crop rotation plan every year, which means if you do not know how to treat your soil and how to treat your conditions in that sense, you really are into the negative scissor, meaning that your costs will increase and your yield will either stay the same or go up a little with the steroid for fertilizer in this sense, but the costs are not into balance with the revenues in that sense, because they choose normally low-risk crops like cereals. Like I said, 50% of the cereals is under land at this moment. So that is quite something. This is all based on interviews that we and our team conducted all over the world. So with Western European countries, as well as with African countries, Asian countries, the South America and North America. So how can we, what is actually the aim? The aim of our system, but in general, the big data system should be to have people, farmers in this case, produce more and better and make better use of the, especially natural resources. Now, how can we do that? We can do that by using our knowledge and experience, like in the experienced countries, but also in African countries where there's a lot of knowledge and experience, but it is not widespreading in that sense. But so this sheet is basically built up out of the main part is the middle part, which came up the most in our interviews as well. So using knowledge and experience from our side, from the experienced farmer side, to get relevant and especially actionable, you said it already in your introduction, Joost, actionable data. Especially the actionable part out of big data is a big thing, because my experience and our experience is that out of 100% of big data, only 5% is useful for actionability, to make something happen, to do something, say, oh wow, I have to increase my fertilizer, or wow, I have to irrigate, or yeah, all that kind of stuff. So, or I have to choose a different product because the conditions don't match what I want to do. So, so that is especially also combined from different data sources. Like I said, we are using satellite, drone, whatever kind of public data, but also purchase data, meteorological data, all in GIS systems. So affordability is another thing that is really important. Well, my experience is people say, why don't you offer it for free, your system? I said, because then you're not taken serious. Because if people don't pay, they just take it like it's if it's not true, kind of. So but affordability is a very big thing in this thing as well, and as well as accessibility. I mean, cloud-based, app-based, but it should be mobile ready in that sense, because we have seen now with all our users that like 60% is using their mobile to enter into these types of tools. Readability is another one that goes back to the part of the education, which means if a farmer is not that well educated, you don't have to tire him with all kinds of graphs and about ratios that are not interpretable or actionable for this person. So you really have to say to get down to one figure in principle. That's the idea. So, and decision support means the farmer should still be in control. I mean, these big data do not take over the farming. Yeah, it needs to be a decision, a guesstimate decision, let's say, yeah? Better than before. And of course, everything under the data protection laws. So I think that is how you can actually get through to use data for smallholder farms. Now, we have a solution for that, at least one of the solutions that are in there in the world. Um, our system, and I'll show you a video of 2 minutes. Our solution gives you more production, more revenue, and better use of resources. So I will start the video now. That will
Welcome to
become
Agricem,
logical.
the first platform that supports you in all your farming decisions. All you have to do for start is to create your parcel. Click on the map and determine the boundaries of your land. After you give your parcel a name and select basic cultivation details, you are all set to proceed and get essential insights for your farm. Agricem brings all insights you need in less than a minute, like your parcel's climate data, as well as important soil parameters, like texture, pH, organic matter, and so on. Based on all existing conditions of your land, Crop Finder shows you how suitable each crop is to your parcel and how much you can expect to earn. Agricem analyzes thousands of different crops and enables you to compare possibilities for rain-fed or irrigated cultivation. All you need to do is to create your parcel. You can click on any crop on the list to reach all important information about it. You can see the suitability and potential revenue you can expect for different periods over the year for rain-fed and irrigated cultivation. You can reach details of your potential revenue for each crop as well as price forecasts and yield forecasts of next year. All other essential economic insights you need, like historical prices, yield, and production values, are just a click away. Planning module lets you plan easily your production, revenue, crop allocations, and rotations over several years. After adding crops that you want to grow from Crop Finder, you can simply drag and drop crops to your field. You can easily adjust land you want to allocate for each crop. You can try and compare different planting dates, growth periods. It is possible to foresee instantly how much you can earn from each plan. If you need good ideas, you can get crop suggestions on different goals that you can select. It is that simple to make use of data, science, and agronomy in your farming decisions. Start growing better with AgriSim today.
So this was a rudimentary movie of our tool. It has much more than that, but it's really targeting an actionable part for a farmer to show his production. So in summary, we have a global platform to match the right crop with the right location. So the moment that we have a latitude, longitude, that is the moment that all the data that we have on that parcel, calculated as I said or not, that is the moment that all comes together. And that moment that you say, I want to see what my crop suitability is, that is the moment that you get all that data will run over more than 3,500 crops, fruits, vegetables, and trees, perennials. We have a forecasting which is like in the most areas we have an accuracy of around 90-95% in the forecasting. With the matching, especially with the soil data, it depends on how many measurement points we have. The more dense measurement points we have, the better our machine learning algorithm has worked, and goes up to 98% accuracy, but it can also go full around 50% if we have less dense data on that. So also you can improve it as a user by putting your laboratory soil report data in there. So the moment that we have accrued more than a normal portion, that you can again run the new machine learning algorithm, that is the moment that your whole area is becoming more accurate. So simulation, we have crop rotations, as you saw with the drag and drop. It tells you the seeding date as well as the best harvesting date. You can then compare that with economics, like what is the best period to release. So you can then make a choice about should I cold store it, or should I try to cultivate it or harvest it earlier so I'm earlier in the market, that kind of stuff. So another one is the world search that was not in the movie. And the world search is that's specially made for corporate companies, fertilizer producers, whatever, whereby you can actually click into a product and say, I would like to see in this country, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, whatever, where can I produce this the best? So then the suitability will show up. And at that moment, that when the suitability shows up, that is the moment that you actually can go and drill down deeper, and the tiles are changing into smaller tiles and smaller tiles and smaller tiles until you're almost into the parcel level. So with AgriSim, there is a more sustainable agriculture production system, because also we will have, and that's not yet in there, but we are releasing that in a month from now, where we do put the nutrient system in there, whereby every crop that we have in our system will also tell into the system, we put it into the system, that the amount of nutrients uptake or give to the soil back. So also including the green manures and the cover crops, etc. So that's when you can calculate as a farmer how much nutrients you need to add in that sense. So it's also taking care of resources in a better way. Plan with insights on suitability and conditions. You saw monitor performance and results. That's also what you have seen. Based on all the satellite pictures that we have, we can also monitor through the growth season in how far, through hyperspectral cameras, in how far it matches the real growth, which we can then correlate again to the climate and to the soil. Analysis, iterate and improve easily. As I said, you can change your soil parameters like pH value, etc. Then we will calculate based on that. And we have an optimized farm management system whereby you can put in every time you fertilize and how much, every time you irrigate, how many liters per hectare or per crop type, or even per bed type in that sense. So that is in principle how our system works. We try to aim at smallholder farms. So our pixel grid is 250 by 250 meters. So there's not a macro thing, and we are all under European Union GDPR law. So in this idea is how we feel that big data should be used, because farmers that have low education, you can give them a lab report. We did that a lot during our interviews. This is a soil lab report. What does it tell you? And there came all kinds of different answers, but they could not make that data connect together in a single report, kind of. So that is what we are doing for them, and then it's the farmer's decision to follow that, or what we normally see is a trial of a certain percentage of their soil, of their parcel, that they will try out with the recommendations we do, and we have seen incomes increase by 300%, yields increase like mad compared to the average in a region or in a country. So that is where I will leave you. Thank you for your time. If you have questions, on the right bottom side there is my email address. Please feel free to ask me any question on the email, or if you want to use our system, there's also a demo possibility for you. So thank you for your time, and I will await the questions either with Joost or through the email. Thank you very much.
Great, Ronald. Very exciting stuff, and fantastic. I know you've been very busy with this for a number of years already, and it's impressive what you guys have been able to accomplish already. And I'm very curious to see how this journey will further evolve, but I'm sure it will be successful. Thanks so much. Again, I just mentioned that also in the chat box. If there's questions or comments, just jot them down in the chat box so we could try and structure that as we move to the Q&A section. Obviously, you also have the opportunity then to pose your question, but we also want to manage our time efficiently and make sure that everybody can have his fair share of Q&A where relevant, or that we can have a discussion among the panel members if there's the opportunity. But for now, I would like to move to our last speaker of the day in our panel, and that's our good friend Viresh. Viresh is the CEO and co-founder, I should say, of Fruitvale. If I pronounce it properly, Viresh, active in India, but obviously, as I have learned to know him, with an eye on the global perspective as well. So I'm very happy that he's here today to share his experience and findings with his work on this exciting proposition and trading platform with you today. And I would welcome him now to take the floor and share your insights with us. Thank you, Viresh.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Joost. It's a pleasure being here with everyone. Thank you very much for the invite to share. I would say the India experience, or the India case. I think some solid parallels to other emerging or informal markets where you have a predominance of smallholder farmers and micro and small enterprise that dominate retail. That said, I am Indian, but I'm actually second generation Kenyan. I was born in Nairobi, so a big jumbo to all of our Kenyan friends that are on the line. Let me share a screen here, and I'll talk about what we are building in India as it pertains to smallholder farmers and excuse me, it's on the top. Okay, as it pertains to smallhold farmers and connecting them to retail markets. So I think one of the key important things here is that while today I think we've spoken a lot about farm efficiencies, inputs, fertilizers, and so on, our perspective is that without transparent market data on the demand side, right, it's very difficult for a smallholder farmer to know what he's growing for, what sort of inputs to procure, and so on. And so that for us is a part of our focus. And I'll walk through some dynamics of the Indian market and how we're using data and technology to solve them. Okay. So the case of India, let's talk about some of the dynamics. Okay, there's about 100 million smallhold farmers in India that usually cultivate an area less than a hectare, sometimes two, but this is sort of the average size. So a lot of fragmentation, you could say, and largely informal operations. Okay, when you add to that a retail space that's dominated by 60 million micro and small enterprise. Okay? You can see the capillarity both on the supply with smallholder farmers and then getting goods to micro enterprise. Okay? In an organized way, in an efficient way, by providing some transparency, okay, which today doesn't exist at all in the market. We think there's a massive opportunity to apply technology, particularly mobile technology, as was mentioned earlier, to provide access to information and market information to the actors on both ends. When you add to that agriculture touches 20% of the GDP in India, of a $3 trillion economy, we're talking about even if there are small points of efficiency, the ability to impact a very, very large sector. Right? And it's a sector that touches about 60% of the employment in the country. Okay, so improving supply chains, digitizing them, formalizing them, providing access to formal capital, those types of things, really has the opportunity to make a massive, massive impact in a country like India, which today is the largest producer of a number of commodities. Okay, so when we talk about impact, the opportunity is huge. Okay, as I mentioned, the fruit and vegetable retail in India is almost entirely unorganized. Okay, you have kind of an ancient open market trading system. There's no supply information that flows. There's no demand information. As you can imagine, there's no transparency on price data that flows. And as you can see in the picture in the middle, also issues on food safety, handling, traceability, packaging, and in today's COVID environment, even in a place like India, becoming more and more relevant as we move through it. Okay? So you imagine trying to connect a smallhold farmer pushing goods through these types of open markets into a big city. The challenges are huge. While the market size, the addressable market size is enormous, okay? close to $100 billion every single year that's consumed internally, and we're not even talking about the potential for export markets. Okay, the problem is again the fragmentation and the informality on the retail side. It's formal supermarkets, as some of the participants on the call may be aware of, in the West or in Europe or in the US, only make up for about 5% of the market in India. The rest are small and micro enterprise. They have poor access to quality supply. Typically, they have to borrow money informally to fund their working capital, etc. So that's where a lot of we feel the inefficiencies lies. And naturally, you have then traders or middlemen in the middle that reap the margins. Okay, so the appreciation of price from farmer to the consumer in a big city, can be upwards of 500%, given the lack of transparency, games being played in the middle. Okay, just to give you a quick idea on and this is 2017 data, but it's relatively the same. Okay. Projected output in India, farm output, close to 200 plus billion dollars. Okay. Unfortunately, there's about 80 billion in post-harvest, waste. Okay. So as we look to, feed a few more billion people by, 2050, or whatever the number is, right? I mean, there's obviously a bigger piece of work to be done there, and a chunk of that then goes to the export markets. Okay, so internal consumption, in India sits at around, 100 billion. Okay, so where do we see the role of technology in this mix? Okay, it's a platform that we've created natively on mobile. Okay, and there's some dynamics in India and in other parts of the world that are helping set the foundation for this. There are today 500 million connected smartphones. Okay? In a country with 1.3 billion people, that's a tremendous penetration rate. Okay? And in the next 5 years, it's expected that the country should reach close to 1 billion smartphones. Okay, which means almost everyone in the country connected, with access to applications, with access to data, with access to information. That again, that follows the theme of this conference around actionable, right? Being able to act on information. Okay. India today has the lowest data rates, mobile data rates in the world, which then also provides easier access to this type of information. So we think that the foundation is there to start connecting the capillarity on the both farmer and retail side with direct sourcing, using technology to then build direct market linkages to micro and small retail, while we eliminate these efficiencies in the middle. Okay, so we're looking at what we call an asset-light tech smart model, where we use technology to effectively digitize or enable existing operations, right, to make them more efficient. Okay, so the opportunity here for us is to really tech enable micro and small enterprises. Okay? There's an opportunity to look at how we can digitize the existing supply chains. Okay? And as you do that and start to have access and capture trade data, okay, think of a country with $100 billion of transaction with virtually no point of sale data being captured. Okay, so when you start to digitize, there's a trade data stream that you can now start to analyze. You can start to apply algorithms on, and use that to not only improve the supply chain, okay, and provide value-added services to micro enterprises and the farmer, but also now you have revenue history, you have transaction history that allow you to then present formal capital. You can data drive lending, you can unlock financing opportunities, right, where most of these, the players, the actors are borrowing informally from money lenders or other sources at interest rates upwards of 5, 6, 7% a month, sometimes higher. Okay, which obviously is a drag on earnings, which is a drag on efficiency, and poor outcomes both on the farm and the retail side. Okay, so what Fruitful has built is a mobile platform, trade platform, that allows the micro and small enterprise to order produce directly from the mobile app, without having to go physically to an open market, as in the picture I showed earlier. Okay, what that allows us to do then is aggregate demand, and we can push that demand into the supply side. Okay, and when we say aggregate demand, it also means that we can start to run algorithms. We've got now predictive forecasting. We can look at seasonality. We can look at typically we have festivals in India where consumers will take offerings to temples and things of that nature, and we see spikes for bananas and apples and so on. So all of that we can put into the algorithm and drive a predictive forecast, market data, price data onto the supply side, okay, into the small farmer, and which are now called cooperatives, farmer producer organizations. Okay, and this is data that they've never had before. Okay, particularly in terms of forecast. Okay, we have now a reasonable footprint, close to over 500 retailers in the Delhi area who order from us, and we can provide into the farmer organizations rolling forecasts. Okay, and these are now firm commitments. Okay, because we have the demand data through our retail footprint, we're able to connect that directly to the farmer and make firm commitments to the farmer or the farmer cooperative on the type of product we'll take. We can also push our kind of direct to market requirements in terms of sorting, in terms of grading, in terms of packaging, which also pushes value add services to the farmer, particularly in the rural area, okay, where products generally were sold in bulk, sold by the truckload. And what happens there is you have a dilution of value, because even high quality products are mixed with the low grade products, and the price typically falls to the floor. Right? So when we can push product requirements, direct to market requirements, we're pushing quantity and pricing information to the farm side. This helps the farmer manage inputs, manage his operation, also manage kind of harvest, right, and what products he should and should not, because we give them access to a direct link. Okay? The other piece that the mobile technology and the data allows us to do is to process payments and transactions electronically. So we've eliminated the handling of cash, and I'll talk about that in a second. We made the investment in supporting electronic payments earlier this year, luckily just ahead of COVID. And as COVID hit, there was a reluctance to handle cash, but we were able to manage the end-to-end operations without paper and without cash, which also means that the payment cycles are faster, both for the farmer and the small retailer. So so cash is rotating faster. They're able to build up working capital cushions, if you will, and it's obviously it's a much more efficient way to do stuff. Okay. The other thing that we start to do when you're part of the trade data stream is you can start to enable micro borrowing, but micro borrowing based on revenue. Okay? Typically, both on the farm side and the retail side, it's kind of a collateral based borrowing. If they were to go into a bank, it's personal guarantees. It's a long drawn up process, and often they're approved for much less than what they've asked for. So what we can do directly is, one, extend a bit of credit limit to the retailer. Okay, we started to provide them also directly on the mobile a simple ledger where they can track payments and orders. Right? So that leads to better cash management. It leads to history, and we've started to develop a kind of an AI-based credit score for each of these retailers that then opens them up to formal access to formal capital. Okay, when you look at the amount of credit demand in India, and several $100 billion of unmet credit demand, largely because it's difficult to assess the risk worthiness of small and micro retailers in a country like India. Right? But when you start to digitize and you have a view into the type of transactions they're doing, this becomes much easier and to data drive how you'll do this. Okay. Just to give you a quick idea, this is actually slightly confidential. This is actual data from us in the investment that we made in electronic transactions. So what you see is in a span of less than 2 months, in March of 2020, we were at 70 to 75% cash collections. Okay, and through the use of data, through the use of mobile technology and connectivity, and supporting immediate payments and reconciliation, we moved to 97% digital transactions. Okay, which brings a tremendous amount of efficiency into the system. Okay, so when you look at this overlap of the agri space, okay, where you can use data and technology to provide immediate demand visibility, You can provide predictive forecasts. You can provide direct market links, get them better prices and access to capital. Overlap that with the financing capability, okay, where you can, on the retail side, show them exactly what products are available, in which quantity, in consistent quality, give them management tools to better manage their operations, and open up to capital. Right. So I think by connecting these two ends, there's a tremendous opportunity to formalize this sector. Okay. I'll talk a little bit about why we launched in India. As Joost mentioned, we are focused on the technology. We see similar dynamics in other markets, certainly in Africa and Latin America, parts of Asia. Okay, we launched in India because we think it's an ideal test bed. There's a kind of a massive small and micro enterprise environment. The parallels to other markets are fairly clear, and we have a slight advantage, I would say, in India with a deep technology talent pool, right? That's able to build cloud technology, build out the apps that we're doing, in countries specific for the Indian market, but with parallels that we see into other markets. Okay? Why did we approach it from an agri plus fintech focus? As I think I mentioned earlier, it's a massive market, $100 billion of internal consumption, and when you look at produce as a perishable, the cash cycle and the rotation is very fast. Okay, so we have orders consistently from our retail footprint every 2 to 3 days. Which means it's throwing off a tremendous amount of trade data. Okay, when you rotate this fast, so on average, we have retailers ordering from us about 11 times a month. Basket sizes are healthy, so you start to collect this kind of information, which allows you to really inform other digital products. The unmet credit gap is huge, so we see a good transition in addition to offering a finance product and eventually other digital products. Right? Think of kind of crop insurance on the farm side when it's pooled across a number of cooperatives. Financing on the supply side. Other kind of rotating working capital needs, heavy machinery financing, other things that we can layer. But once you have access to the trade data and you understand how these businesses work, what the consumption patterns are like, what the rotations are like, then you're operating off of data and not just trying to guess what's happening on either end. Okay. Some of the things that we're learning in India that I think are probably applicable to other markets as well. We're finding that not only on the micro and small enterprise side, but on the farm side, access to efficient access to capital is one of the most pressing needs. Okay, most of these operations, as I said, borrow informally, and that really is a drag on their earnings and productivity. Okay, but in order to do that, we're finding that you really need to have a trade linkage. You need access to that trade data. You need to understand the flows. You need to understand the frequency, and without being part of the transaction, it's very difficult to then open either party on the farm side or the supply side or on the retail to capital. Right? It's just too difficult. There are a number of micro finance organizations trying to do it. Obviously, they have to put people on the ground. You need a way to assess risk, and that's very difficult to scale. If you can get into the transaction side, digitize it, enable things like electronic payments. In Kenya, there's a company doing something very similar to us called Twiga, also using mobile payments through M-Pesa and things like that. Then we have a chance of opening up to capital, and in our view, not just local capital, right? But there are, with the right metrics, with the right credit score, at international standards, with rigorous risk assessment, I think there's an opportunity to open, these markets to global pools of capital, which I think will bring a tremendous amount of value to the ag sector. So that's our experience in India. Thank you all for your time and attention. I think we see a massive opportunity on how to apply technology, data analysis on making both of these ends more efficient and improving outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's great stuff, and I really appreciate you sharing this. And so wonderful that you could free up your time for this. I noticed a couple of questions already when as the presentations were held. So what I want to suggest is that as we are now at the end of the formal part in terms of the presentations, that we take the next 10 minutes or so to allow for some questions and answers, or maybe some discussion if there are specific items which come up. So I noted a few questions already, and I will try to sort of point them to the appropriate person or company or organization. Let me start by a question. I think it was from the gentleman Gopal from ETG on and I would like to ask that to Venetia. I think Grace touched on it briefly, but it might be good to understand, because obviously I think it's a key question if you run a business. The data updates of the data you shared with us, Venetia. Can you give us a bit of an insight or understanding on how often, how frequent these data are updated? So it gives a sense of, let's say, how much up with the actual situation those numbers are, and maybe after you have responded to this, Venetia, maybe it would be interesting as well to hear the same from you, Antonella. Although you come from a bit of a different angle, but obviously you're also, covering some of these data fields. So please, Venetia, if you are there, yes, you are.
Yes. Hey, thank you. No, that's a really good question. So the system has lots of different kinds of data, so maybe I can walk you through some of it. So the price data, the FOB and the retail prices will be updated monthly as they're collected. And then the consumption data is collected through IFDC's FTWGs, the fertilizer technical working groups, which meet annually with public and private sector in each of the countries. So once the customs data becomes available for the previous year, so that will be added annually. And then the cost buildup data doesn't change a whole lot, year to year, but it will, those will be refreshed, say, every few years. Well, we'll put in the new FOB data, so the calculations will change, but each of the cost components, which might be based on like a percentage, like if those don't change, then we wouldn't update those. So that would be every couple of years. But the system updates the data sort of quickest is monthly, and then the longest could be yearly or semi-annually. Yeah.
Great, Venetia. Thanks so much. Antonella, on your end, how well are you able to update the data, or how frequent does it happen? And
yes,
a additional point to this is a question on the coverage of data from Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Mozambique, which was also asked by somebody, because it seems to be a bit thinner compared to some of the other countries.
Well, First of all, I have to say that obviously I don't produce the data. I use the data of the association. There are three key components to this data. There are numbers that come from IFA, so the International Fertilizer Association is mainly imports and export into Africa. And then I got the numbers that come from AFO, IFDC, AFO, and AFAP. AFAP feeds into AFO, you know, East Africa, West Africa, and Southern Africa. Collecting data and making sure they are reliable is the most difficult job that, you know, somebody can do. Takes time, it takes resources, and therefore it has a cost like any business. Usually the figures on import and exports are collected by IFA on an annual basis. They collect it on a quarterly basis, but to be reliable, you have to wait until the end of the year to have the full set of data for the year. And therefore, there is always a time lag of at least 1 year before you get all the data. They are generally collected by IFA based on based on members' input, you know, collection from members directly. The data from AFO, they are collected, I believe, based on customs and also based on research on the fields, you know. So all this depends, and they will allow also them to step in, you know, to support this. But I would say that I came across many times the difficulty of getting some information on specific countries versus other countries in Africa sub-Sahara, because maybe the countries are smaller, there is less finance to collect the data on a particular year, while some other countries, there are some donors that support that, and so it's easier. On the specific question about Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, I think that if you look at my Africa portal, you will see that you have the same, more or less the same information in there, so you get all the information collected, but obviously in countries like Zimbabwe and Zambia, which are landlocked, sometimes it's difficult to judge the import and the export because they may be coming from a different port and then transported inland, which is one of the major issues anyway, not only for data collection but for trade in Africa sub-Sahara. So it's not an easy process, and every time you need more input, more research, more resources, more finance to do that. Like, for example, at the moment, I really think I developed the portal because I wanted to develop quickly to make sure that I went a step farther in visualizing the data of Africa. But I then realized, and that's where technology designing comes in, that I could only really do the interactive version with the fonts that I had until then accessible on the desktop. While I think that the next step will be to develop accessibility by mobile and laptops, because when you come to smallholders, farmers, or smaller actors, certainly mobile is a technology that plays quite a good thing. Now, if Afo, Grace, or even Sandra wants to add more about the collection of data and the availability of data, please chip in.
Okay, understood. Thank you so much, Antonella. Ronald, question: do you already have a printed? Can you tell us a little bit about where that is? And the second question for you is your solution is really exciting. But how about accessibility? Where might struggle with the degree of sophistication you're offering.
I could not get your first question, Joost. What was your first question?
Your footprint in Africa, your presence in Africa with your solution so far.
Yes. Okay. So we have around 1,000 individual farmers in Africa, and those are spread over Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, and Zimbabwe at this moment. And your second question was? Hello?
Yeah. Question was with regards to the accessibility to farmers who do not have the same degree of education or training.
Yeah, if you look at our interface, I mean, we do not tire the farmers with a lot of dots that they have to connect themselves. We actually create a ballpark figure in terms of suitability on products by the amount of percentage that it would work in that conditions. So that means that all the data that we are gathering, and we assume a farmer does not and cannot gather that type of information, and not even be able to, when there's so much data, to interpret all that into a correlated way. So we tend to jot that down into a single figure, which means a percentage suitability. Also, in terms of the usefulness of forecasts, etc. I know that, and we have seen that a lot of farmers, they are just knowing the prices in their region. They compare that to our forecasted prices, and then say, okay, yeah, that's true. So you have to comply most what they do know, and build that trust on the system. If, for instance, a farmer cannot draw his parcel because he has never done that before, we also provide, before he gets a license, we make sure through videos that he can actually draw his parcel. And our mobile app is a little bit different than our cloud-based map. So in the mobile, screen size is much smaller, so you don't even have to, for instance, create your parcel. Just put a point in the Google Maps where your parcel is located. So we really try to make it foolproof with double O, in terms of that everybody can be using our system in that sense. And if you want to go into depth, you can go into depth through all the graphs that you've seen in the movie.
Great. Well, thanks so much for to address this. Again, there will also be ample opportunity, of course, to connect offline for any bilateral interactions. And if that is a problem, you can always reach out to us in order to be connected. Yogesh, a few questions for you. First of all, with regards to the product, because you're dealing with perishables, how do you manage product quality? I'm not even talking about the product losses, which are obviously vast with perishable product, but more about standards of quality, certification, that type of thing. And then second, I also saw that in the chat box already. Currently, you don't have a footprint in Africa, but there's clearly some appetite from different angles. I noticed an interest from Indorama in Nigeria. I noticed another question from AFAB on that aspect. How do you view your interest or appetite to have a presence in Africa?
Sure.
So those questions, over to you.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Hughes. I think for the first question on product quality, okay, the first step for us is to get the systems, the algorithms, and the platform moving, so to speak. Yeah. So today we focus on what you could call maybe you could call them sort of semi-perishable, or at least slightly longer shelf life products. So bananas, apple, pomegranate, watermelon, oranges, things like that. And the way we manage the perishability is that and this is the power of data and transparency, right? is that we do not hold inventory for more than 2 days. Okay, so when we aggregate the demand off of our platform, and you start to provide forecast, rolling forecast, AI-driven, prediction, we have a very high confidence in the commitments we can make to the farmer organization. Okay, so when we go to a small farmer or small farmer organization and make a commitment for say 500 boxes of apples, we are pretty confident using the data that there's demand in our footprint for 500 boxes. Okay, so the turnaround for us is very, very quick, and as we tighten that up even more, then we'll be able to organize the back end supply chains to then deal with even more perishable products. Just to give you an example, last year in the mango season, which is highly perishable, particularly because it's a summer fruit, and without cold store in India, temperatures are reaching 40, 45 degrees. So it's a very, very tight cycle for a product like mangoes. And last year we successfully did close to 1,000 tons of mango through our system. But this is the advantage of data use. Okay, when you can aggregate the demand, you know that the demand is confident. You can provide that transparency into the supply side. Then you don't have to sort of speculate and carry inventories for for long periods of time, or put things in cold storage. Right? So that's the advantage for us. On the second question, as I mentioned, we're focused on building this kind of asset light tech enabled model with plans to grow. We haven't launched in Africa yet, but being born in Nairobi, my heart is in Kenya. So I'd love the opportunity to speak to anyone who's interested in looking how we could deploy in Africa.
Right. That would be fantastic. And do keep us engaged there, because we would love to know how you're evolving your business there and the partnerships. Question to you, Chilande, Grace. Two questions actually. You mentioned the difficulties of movement of products and persons in West Africa. Can you elaborate a little bit how that is now evolving, and how you also see that in terms of the COVID-19 lockdown developing? Is that changing a lot? What's going on there? Just a quick snapshot, please. And two, I got a question about Botswana. Apparently, that's not part of your data collection. It might actually be related also to Antanella's. If that is indeed the case, quick.
Okay, thank you, Joost. So when it comes to movement, the comment that I made was that there's different countries had different restrictions on COVID and on movement for the different for within their countries. So the comment I was making with regards to the COVID watch is we're monitoring how those restrictions are affecting movement of product. So ideally in West Africa, the season was not yet on, so movement of product was not ideally very limited. But the thing is, we would be assessing it in the coming month or so, just to assess whether product is moving efficiently, and if so, and if not, then what are the actual issues at the borders, and then how would those issues be corrected? So for now, we cannot clearly say that there is a problem in West Africa, but what we do understand, and I could maybe draw it back to East Africa, is countries like, let's say, Uganda and Rwanda had their borders closed, and so product could not, there's limitation on movement of people, and then ideally there was delays of product or cargo moving across the borders, and this would see 2 to 5 day delays in moving product, which then has an implication on cost of the product at the end of the day. So that's something that we're constantly monitoring. When it comes to Botswana, the question was asked on the basis of why we don't cover certain markets. And this is, like I mentioned, it's based on demand for data, based on demand for information, as well as the market size. So is this a growing market? Is this a big market? And then is there interest from a regional or an international perspective for players to come and develop those markets? So if there's interest there, then we have an incentive for us to collect and monitor that market. But if a market is very small or has limited growth in the fertilizer sector or in the agricultural sector, then that also translates in the limitation of people being interested in the data.
Okay, great. Thank you for this comprehensive response. Well, we're getting to the end of this webinar, so unfortunately there's no window anymore for sharing further questions and having this interaction continue. But I think it's been really exciting. Obviously, there's still the chance to continue having some interactions over the chat or during the final minutes of this webinar, and you will be able to connect offline as well. Of course, I saw that there was already some answers being provided. I would like to now move to the final section. We have been now able to discuss along three very exciting themes in my view, which is along market insights, retail trading, and farmland optimization, with the different presentations we had and the related discussions. And I think if you boil it down, it comes back to the point I tried to address in the opening session as well. If you look at data, which is a really a box full of quantities, characters, and symbols, that only has any sense if you're able to somehow give that context in terms of logic, using the right interface, the user interface, and leveraging different technologies and logic available in the context of algorithms or machine learning, artificial intelligence, and there's a whole world behind all those on how you then can make some sense out of this data. But it really comes down at the end of the day to the impact. How does it really translate into transactions on the ground, livelihood enhancement, and specific market structured dynamics, demand, supply, and yields. And that can only work, this dynamic, if it's backed up by strong public-private partnerships, which secure and backstop inclusion and a broad support with right stakeholders and good funding to get it initially going, and a business model which makes sure that it can sustain. With those closing words, I would like to actually hand over to the real closing remarks from our President and CEO, Jason Scarponi. I do understand he's still available and online. I sincerely hope so, at any rate. So if that is indeed the case, Jason, I would really like to invite you to provide some closing remarks so that we can close this very exciting and interesting webinar together with your words and observations. The floor is yours, Jason. Sandra, do you know whether Jason is still present?
He might have left.
Okay, because I did notice that he was online earlier on, so that might be a connectivity issue there.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen, guys. Obviously, I'm not in the same position as Jason is, but what I can tell you is obviously what we've been discussing today has been, really cool for me at any rate to participate in. I'm really impressed also with the degree of engagement, interaction, and feedback. And what I would really appreciate is if you do continue to participate and and work with us on these type of interactions. We will continue to organize these webinars. There's still a couple of really exciting ones coming up again soon, because if there's anything key in this strange era, is that we reach out to one another and continue to exchange these type of relevant insights as a community, as brothers and sisters. Again, thank you very much, and God bless you, and do reach out to one another offline or come back to us if there's anything you would like us to enable or facilitate or liaise on. All right? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Joost.
Thanks very much, Joost. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye to everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
I think I'm going to get a cup of tea now. Cheers.
Sure. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you.